Stick around. I'm so grateful you're here. 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 Stick around. I'm so grateful. Hi friend, welcome back to Minimalish. I'm your host, Desiree, and today I am coming to you solo, which I have been doing lately about every other week, and I will probably continue to do that, but I'm coming to you solo to talk to you about some changes that are going down, not necessarily with the podcast, at least not right now, but mostly changes that are going down in my own life. I have an announcement, but also we're going to talk about the topic of change in general. We are officially over halfway through the year. We are in July of 2020. I almost said 2019. This year has been a whirlwind, and it has been a year, truly. This can be a good time for reflection. This is a time where the academic calendar planners come out, and this is the time where, you might need to refresh your goal planner if you use one of those, if you use a 6-month one. So it is a time of year when we do, some of us at least, pause and reflect. And I think it's a great time to do that, to look back at the first half of the year and reflect, because let's be honest and say that the goals that we set at the beginning of the year, we might have forgotten about them even. They may just be less relevant, and honestly, the way we've maybe structured our life, the things that we've hoped for, the way that we've spent our time in the past years, it just may be less relevant to this year. So maybe you are in this place where you realize you haven't even thought about the goals that you set for yourself, and they seem now way less relevant than you thought they were. I think it's a good time for some change, whether that's looking back, changing our goals, changing what we're aiming for this year, or whether it's on a larger scale. I know that this weird year has brought a lot of change in my mind. So when it comes to goals, I'm going to go ahead and refer you back to the goal setting episode that I did back at the end of 2019. So if you are at this place where you want to reflect, where you're feeling like you want to make some change, or you just want to kind of reset yourself and set new goals for the end of the year, which who knows for the rest of this year, who knows what that will look like. But there's no harm in just revamping our goals or revamping what we are expecting for the year. I won't repeat myself with the prompts that I put in that episode, but it was one of my most listened to episodes. So if that's where you are, I think going back through those same prompts could be really beneficial and eye-opening when this year is most likely not gone as we had all planned. But what I do want to talk to you about today is change. Whether you are changing a goal or you are wanting to make bigger changes, I feel like this year, at least for me, has prompted this desire to make some changes. I don't know why, but staying stuck in my house, even though I was already working from home before all of this, it really made me reflect on where I wanted to be once life returns to normal, or just where I want to be career-wise, what we want our life to look like as a family. So if you are in that same boat, we're going to talk about that today. as I've kind of expressed this need for change or this draw to change in my own life on social media, I've seen a lot of you kind of express that you're in the same place. So I thought that this would hopefully be something that would encourage you as I first make a quick announcement, and then second, talk about just this idea of how to know when it's time for a change or how to even deal with those feelings, or even more so, what steps we can take when we are feeling like we want to make a change, but maybe feeling afraid or resistant to it. For the sake of this episode, I am talking about career change specifically, but you could apply what I'm going to talk about here to any type of change in your life. I am no expert. The changes that I make in life are not perfectly planned out, but I do speak from the experience of there being many times in my life where I felt a pull for change, but I was afraid of that pull. So when it comes down to it, change is inevitable. It happens, and I think we often have a false sense of control and permanence over our lives and the current positions that we might be in our lives, whether that's career or just seasonal type things. But nothing is permanent, and change needs to happen at some point or another. So it's better if we don't fear it so much, or it's better if we don't take such a judgmental stance of ourselves when we feel that change is what we need. So first of all, like I said, I wanted to announce a change that is coming in my own life, and it will affect the podcast in a lot of ways. So I'm not really sure what all of those ways are quite yet, but I just thought I would share this change with you. If you haven't heard me announce it over social media yet, I am going to be going back to teaching. So if you've listened to my story on this podcast for a while, then you know I used to be a teacher. I was a middle school teacher and a high school teacher, and I'm going back to teaching 7th grade reading, and I'm very excited about it. I know that in a lot of the ways that I tell my story, I talk about how minimalism gave my family the freedom for me to be able to stay home with my daughter because we downsized our home and we were able to make that change that I felt so called to at the time. And so this is a big change. This is a big, basically, I guess, twist in that story, because now I feel a pull to go back to my career. And I talk about how, or when I announced this, I talked about the fact that, you know, I've always been working from home. I could never really step completely away from work and be a full-time stay-at-home mom. That really wasn't really what I was looking for anyways. I just wanted to be able to be more flexible and be home as I started my motherhood journey, basically. A lot of that work looked like what I'm doing right now, podcasting, especially over the past year. And this journey really started as I was applying to virtual teaching jobs. I thought, you know, I wanted to have less pressure on podcasting to be my full-time income, because when something becomes your work, sometimes that takes the fun out of it. So, and it puts a lot more pressure on it. So that was part of it. But I started to feel like I wanted to be back in the classroom just for several reasons. The way that our world is right now made me feel like I wanted to be back in the classroom and have influence in that way. I won't go into all the details. Basically, through searching for virtual teaching jobs, I got emails about physical in the classroom teaching jobs, and I just figured, why not try? And here I am a few weeks later. I am going to be teaching, like I said, 7th graders, and I'm so excited. So that's the announcement. It's a huge career change for me, going back to my career, and I plan to hopefully be able to share content related to that in case others are making that change or want to make that change in the future, or just sharing minimalism from the perspective of a full-time working mom. Definitely is going to look different than what my life has looked like over the past 2 years. So this is exciting, but overall, the whole process taught me even more so this thing that I believe, this thing that I talked about in the past on this podcast, that it is okay to change our minds. I do have an entire episode where I kind of go through that idea of why we kind of fear change and why we sometimes put our full identity in what we're currently doing and who we currently are, and then we feel like we can't make any changes. And I struggled with that a little bit as I was moving towards this change. But when it comes down to it, I know that it's okay and it's good to change our minds. Life happens in seasons. There is a season to do one thing when maybe in the next season you'll be pulled to do another, and that is okay, and that is a good and beautiful thing about life. I hope you're enjoying today's episode, but I'm taking a quick break to thank today's sponsors. Since the beginning of this year, I have made it a goal to actually stick to a workout plan and work out consistently. And I am honestly going to say that I have done it. It has gone great. Something that has made it a more enjoyable experience is the socks I've been wearing while I work out. That's why I'm excited to share Bombas with you today. While socks won't make working out any less hard, Bombas is on a mission to make it more comfortable. I personally love how Bombas socks fit my feet. I love the no-show socks. They fit perfectly within my shoes while working out. They don't show at all, which I absolutely love, and they're comfortable. They stay on my feet. They don't slide into my shoe. We all have different types of workouts and ways to stay active that we enjoy, so Bombas has a lot of different performance socks designed for everything from running to hiking to cycling and more. They even have performance socks in styles made specially for basketball or tennis, running, golf, and more. They're made with a lightweight polycotton blend, which means no matter how hard you're working, your feet will stay cool, dry, and comfortable, never sweaty. Most of all, I'm a huge fan of Bombas' mission. Did you know that socks are the #1 most requested item in homeless shelters? Bombas socks were created to change that. For every pair you buy, Bombas donates a pair to someone in need. Go to bombas.com/minimalist today and get 20% off your first purchase. That's bombas.com/minimalist for 20% off. bombas.com/minimalist. All right, let's get back to today's episode. Let's talk a little bit more in detail now, just kind of application, because this episode isn't meant to just be a full-on announcement. I just wanted to kind of bring that into it and let you know what's ahead. I am planning on keeping the podcast up and running regularly, at least through the next couple of months. Some changes might come beyond that, but just stay tuned and I will let you know if that's happening. And I'm thankful that you're here. I love this space. That hasn't changed. So let's talk about change in general. When do we know when it is time for change and to actually make those steps forward? What would that look like? I am giving some basics here, but I think it can be so much more simplified than we commonly make it whenever there are big life changes ahead. So the first thing that I want to talk about is just this idea of intuition. Again, I'm not an expert, but I do believe that we have one life, and I believe that we should be doing the things that we feel called to do in this life. Believe that we should be moving towards the things that we feel a pull towards, especially, of course, if those things are constructive and productive and good things. Sometimes we feel a pull towards negative things. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about positive things, even if they're different than what you thought you were supposed to be doing or what you thought you'd be called to. I'm not only talking about your job, and it doesn't mean that your job needs to be your absolute calling and your favorite thing in the world, but it just means, if you're miserable in your current job, or if you're feeling like you want change in some way, whatever you're doing in your current season, if you feel like you want change, maybe it's time to explore that. So maybe you have been feeling a draw to stay home with your kids, or return to a career that you once left, like I did, or maybe a draw to start your own business, go into a different field than you got your degree in, return to school, whatever it might be. These all feel like really big decisions when they start to pop up in our brain, right? We start to stumble on those thoughts and they feel really big and they feel really scary. But if you can't stop thinking about it, I think at that point, that's when we know it's time to at least explore what that change would look like. I personally felt it in small tugs, little thoughts of, I miss teaching, I miss middle schoolers, or I wish I could go back into the classroom. Things that I would pop up and I would kind of just push down because I didn't think I was ready. I actually didn't think I was going to return to the classroom anytime soon. But the current state of the world was somehow drawing me in that direction even more, and I just kept feeling these small tugs. The next step, if you're feeling small tugs like that, or maybe it's even bigger tugs, the next step is to, if you've heard the phrase, just do the next right thing. I know Emily P. Freeman has a whole podcast called The Next Right Thing, which I highly recommend. But taking one small step in the direction of the change that you are thinking you might want to make, how does it feel when you make that first step? Maybe it's, if you want to go back to school, applying, just filling out an application. How does it feel when you make that next step? If it feels good, if it feels right, make the next step and see what happens. When we feel that change is ahead, it feels like there are so many steps to get there. We push it down, or it just feels too big, too scary, and we don't know what to do. We feel stuck. But if we can just make one step forward at a time, we see that even though it would be great if we knew the end result, or if we could kind of jump there and get there faster, our path becomes clearer and clearer as we make those first steps, and then the next step and the next step. And we start to be able to clarify if it is time for change or not. You are the only one that can answer that question. I can't tell you exactly how to know if it is the right time for a change, a career change, or whatever type of change in your life. It just looks like listening to those tugs, listening to how you're feeling, your intuitions, the things that come up, and making one step forward, but the next right step after that. So the last thing I want to talk about in this episode is just why change is so hard in general. Why do we often feel stuck where we are? Why do we feel like if we want to make a change, we can't? Why is that a thing? Why does that come up? Because when we look back, we can see that we've probably made a lot of changes in life, whether it's like the natural changes of the progression of a life. But why is it so hard to make changes that maybe don't seem like they are on the path that we thought was set out for us, or the ways that we are supposed to move in life? So here are just a couple of things that have come up for me through this specific change and through changes I've made in the past. The first thing I think, and what I'm realizing now more than ever, is permanence. Whenever we feel like we want to make a change, we often perceive it as such a big deal because we believe it is going to be a permanent change. But when it comes down to it, a lot of change is temporary, because life is bound to change again. And I struggled hard with this feeling when stepping away from a career. And I also struggled with this when I first got married and we moved away from family, because my vision was always to live near them. 6 years later, I see now that that season of being away from family and being in a new place was a memory, and we did end up back near family. But it was a really great memory, and it was a beautiful season in our life. So I just give that example to say that change is not necessarily permanent. A lot of times it is not permanent, and life is going to continuously change. So we can just kind of put that idea of permanence, that fear of making a change being such a huge deal because it's going to be long-term or permanent, we can kind of put that behind us, because that is not necessarily true, and most times it's not true at all. The next thing I think trips us up, I know it does for me, is what other people are going to think about the change that we want to make. It is so important to remember that this is your life. It is not theirs. And I have to remind myself of this all the time. I struggle with this. I am preaching to myself. I struggle with every little decision, what people think about my decisions sometimes, even though most of the time I realize they're not thinking about my decisions at all. So if the idea of what other people are going to think about the change you are going to make is tripping you up, just remind yourself that it's not their life, it is yours. Where are you going to be happy? Where are you going to feel best making an impact? What changes do you feel convicted in your life to make? Those are the things that you are going to want to pursue regardless of what other people think, especially when those people are outside of your immediate family that you live with and take care of. Those opinions matter a little bit more, but the opinions outside of that, it is not their life, it is yours. And the last thing, of course, that I think we all experience when change is ahead is fear. When we can't see what's ahead, when we don't have the map laid out for us, fear will pop up. We could fear that something is going to go wrong. What if we don't like the change that we made? What if? Instead of asking these what if questions, what if it's going to go terribly wrong? What if I'm making the worst mistake of my life? Which, by the way, I do not think that about going back to my career. But when any change comes up and I'm feeling those what if questions, instead, let's ask ourselves, what if we trust? What if we trust ourselves? What if we trust God and what He has for us? Whatever it is that you believe, whatever question you need to ask yourself to get yourself away from that fearing and what if mindset. I think a simple look back in the rearview mirror can shift this fear perspective. The rearview mirror can remind us that we've gotten through a lot of hard things. Yes, things might not work out exactly the way that we planned. Most likely they won't with this change that we are making, but they will work their way out. I personally do not see the full picture. I do not know what is ahead perfectly when it comes to my own changes in life. I mean, with the way that this year has gone, none of us really know what the months ahead look like. But I know that I truly look forward to seeing how it all plays out and taking one step at a time. I encourage you, if you're feeling a call to change, if you're feeling little pools pop up in your mind towards something, towards a new season or towards a change of some sort that is going to be positive, that is going to be a way that you can make an impact in a different way, lean into those changes. Take the first step, see what happens, see where it leads you. That is all I have for today's episode, and I hope it was encouraging to you. If it was encouraging to you, if you enjoyed this episode, if you enjoyed the podcast in general, I would love it if you'd share it with a friend. You can share it on Instagram and tag me so that I can see that you're sharing it. I appreciate you so much for doing that and for spreading the word about the podcast. Thanks so much for being here and listening in, and I will talk to you right back here again next week.